G'day guys, my name is CJ. This is the Galaxy Z Flip 3, and I gotta say, I think I'm in love. This is my 1 month review. Let's get started. So, smartphones over the last decade or so have followed pretty much the same recipe ever since the original iPhone was introduced. You've got a glass slab of a phone in a candy bar form factor. And of course, things changed over the years. You got improved chips, better cameras, bigger screens, and more premium builds, but it was always the same deal. You had a singular rectangular slab with a screen just on one side. So when foldable phones became a thing, the change in form factor was pretty interesting, but the barrier to entry was also a big problem. Now in Australia, the original Z Fold cost about $3,000. The Motorola Razr was a massive $2,700, and even the original Z Flip was almost $2,200. Those are some pretty crazy prices for an experimental form factor. So when Samsung released this year's Z Flip 3 for a far more reasonable $1,500, well, I had to take a look. And of course, it still isn't cheap, but it's definitely the most accessible a foldable phone in this modern day has been. And despite the lower price, they haven't exactly compromised in the tech department either. It's got an improved hinge that's now water resistant, and it's also showing even more resistance from pesky dust that can get in. It's got a Snapdragon 888, which is the top of the range for 2021, 8 gigs of RAM, dual cameras with a 12 megapixel main shooter with an f1.8 aperture and optical stabilization, and the standard 12 megapixel ultra wide, nailing all the basics. On the inside, it's got a 6.7 inch folding 120Hz LTPO AMOLED display, and they've also increased the size of the outer display to a far more usable 1.9 inch AMOLED. The version I've got is a custom design that you can get by ordering direct through Samsung, which I did. So know that this video comes from the perspective of a paying customer and really are my honest opinions. Now I love this Stormtrooper Panda black and white color scheme, and the Pixel 2s black camera module topped with the outer screen rounds out a really elegant little package. The bezel surrounding the main screen is definitely thicker than most phones in 2021, but that thicker bezel provides an extra layer of padding and protection for the display. Plus, there's a pre-applied screen protector which feels as close to glass as a plastic protector can get, which is really nice. It can still leave creases if you put too much nail pressure on it though, but otherwise it feels really nice to use and swipe. On the sides and the frame itself, you've got the stronger Armor aluminum frame, which is super slim to minimize thickness once folded. And on both halves, you've got Gorilla Glass Victus, which is a super strong premium material. Using the flip mechanism though is really solid, and actually almost too solid. It's really not an easily opened phone with one hand unless you flick it really aggressively, which can look kind of cool, but I also have this irrational fear if I keep doing that, the top half of the phone is going to snap off and fly away. So for me, it's always going to be a two-hand flip, which does look less cool than the old flip screens that would literally flip open in one move like that. But the advantage of such a strong mechanism means you can effectively have it flip to any reasonable angle, and that's going to be great for your ergonomic content viewing and calling needs. And that is going to be great because the speakers are a stereo setup with strength and oomph to match. The main earpiece is a fully fledged speaker in its own right, and you get really nice stereo sound separation. And the flip allows it to bend to the contours of your face, so in theory, your mouth is going to be closer to the microphone and you should get pretty clear and crisp audio with calls. So far, friends and family have confirmed that call quality is excellent and there's no complaints at all. Plus, you can use the external speakers to make calls as well with the phone still closed, so that's great. So with the Snapdragon 888, performance is as excellent as you'd expect. And if you're familiar with Samsung's One UI experience, then it's going to be no different this time round. Scrolling is buttery smooth and it handles processor-intensive tasks like gaming and photo editing like a champ. One UI for the Flip also has a few optimizations specific to its uses, and I've really enjoyed being able to use split screen for video and things like a Twitter timeline on the bottom. Now, I'm someone that doesn't mind watching YouTube and other content in vertical form whilst I'm working, and the Flip's folding form factor means the top half of the screen can be at a comfortable viewing angle whilst I can casually browse the web or the Twitter timeline on the bottom half. Like with the Note and Fold, if you're someone that uses the quick access side panel feature, you can even allocate specific app pairings to automatically launch in split screen mode. And it's really easy to manage window sizes with a swipe or a tap. Then if you didn't want to use it folded or in split screen, the experience is the same as other Samsung phones. Sure, the Flip 3 has a 22.9 aspect ratio, which is on the taller and narrower side, but it's not that different to the S21, which is also quite narrow. Plus, the narrower footprint makes it quite easy to be used one-handed, though with the main quirk being that central crease on the screen. With the screen turned off, that crease is pretty visible. With normal content use, or with the phone completely folded out though, it's almost imperceptible. That is if you're talking about looking at it. Swiping is another thing, and you'll definitely feel the crease as you swipe up and down it. But whether or not this is going to be an issue really boils down to how you hold your phone. Now, I typically hold phones on the bottom half, allowing it to rest in my palm, and in this position with my short stubby thumbs, unless I need to interact with something higher up, I almost never go past the middle and touch the crease. Plus, Samsung has the advantage of its One UI being specifically optimized for one-handed use. So combined with the Android 11's gesture navigation, it's never become an issue. But I can see where it can be distracting, especially if you are someone who uses the phone more in the middle or if you've got long thumbs. That being said, the flipping screen also means the inner display is somewhat protected and doesn't have to sit in the pocket and constantly slide up and down to maybe cause abrasions down the track. But that middle gap also means that over time, lint and dust can still creep in. And even over the last month of use, it's gradually accumulated more and more dust inside, which does make me hope that the internal brushes does its job to keep the dust out. If you hear closely, you can actually feel a creak or a click when you open or close the phone. And I think it's the brushes rubbing together to keep things clear. So we'll see in about 12 months time if it's still the same or if dust does make its way in and cause problems. Now, where ergonomics could also improve is in its power button and fingerprint sensor location, which is all the way up here in the upper half. It's just far enough away that my thumb can't easily reach it without shuffling my hands, and it's still a little bit too far away for my index finger if I'm holding it in my left hand. Meaning each time the fingerprint sensor needs to be used, like in different banking apps or apps just have extra security, you do need to slightly shuffle the phone or use the other hand. Again, it's not a major problem, but it just takes away from the experience just that little bit. And I get why it's there, maybe to ensure the folding mechanism is as strong as possible, but maybe a slight tweak can be made next year. But where I do love the ergonomics of the phone comes down to its cameras. As mentioned before, it's got a dual camera system on the back and a single 10 megapixel hole punch selfie camera on the inside. Now that all sounds pretty standard, but the magic is in its ability to fold. This means you can switch the location of the camera viewfinder between the two halves, top or bottom. Now this opens up new camera angles to get those creative juices flowing. For example, I particularly love being able to get really low and still see the viewfinder, kind of like you can with cameras with a tilty flippy screen. So I can get shots that would have been a little too awkward to get with standard candy bar phones. It makes it easy to take photos of my dog, for example. On top of that, the outer screen can also be used as a viewfinder when closed. You double tap the power button and boom, you've now got access to some of the best quality selfie photos of any phone in 2021. It's also optimized for this sort of use with a bunch of ways to trigger the shutter. Tap the volume button to shoot straight away, or tap the screen or show your palm to trigger a 2-second timer. You can also swipe to choose between shooting photos or videos and swipe between angles as well with the wide or ultra wide. There is one quirk though, being that any photo or video taken this way results in a squared crop instead of the full frame, which is kind of weird, but I guess in the age of social media, it's not the biggest deal. Plus, using the ultra wide for these types of photos often results in photos that make you look like Inspector Gadget with Go-Go Gadget arms, but at least you look good doing so. And as I mentioned before, you need to keep in mind that video is recorded in the same format as well. Now, photos and videos taken though, in general, are really great. They're not going to be on the same level as something like the S21 Ultra or the iPhone 13, because the sensors aren't anywhere near as big, but the processing more than makes up for it, and majority of people are going to be satisfied. You'll have to really pixel peep and make really close side-by-side comparisons to notice any major differences, and even low-light nighttime photos are pretty competitive with the best, all the way down to the ultra-wide lens, which still has excellent sharpness, detail, and color reproduction as far as ultra-wide lenses go. The selfie camera is a pretty good camera too. It doesn't have the widest angle, but it still retains pretty decent details for those selfie TikToks, Reels, and Zoom calls. Video quality is also really solid too. The main shooter can record up to 4K 60, and it also retains a lot of the same video features seen in other Galaxy phones like super steady recording and single take. Quality in the right lighting conditions are on point, and stabilization works pretty well too. Again, the folding design means you can get nice and low for some pretty unique angles, and again, great for videoing your fluffy friends. Now, what I've also enjoyed using is the outer screen. The at-a-glance functionality has been a real boon for me whilst I work. Being able to double tap the screen to show my time, manage my notifications, reply to messages, and answer calls has been really useful. It makes it far less tempting to open the phone fully and then get distracted. There's also a few other widgets like music control, weather, and step count, but there's not really any other third-party widgets. It would be great to see some, because I feel like this screen could be a lot more useful than it already is right now. A screen like this is perfect for something like smart home controls, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. With that said though, the biggest draw for me is still the form factor. I love that this folds down to the size of a little square. No longer do I have to fear that my phone is so big it's going to slide out of my pocket and onto the cold hard ground and break. And I can tell you, I've had a couple of broken phones because of that. I can slip this phone into pretty much any pair of pants or shorts and be pretty confident that it's going to sit snugly safely. Or if you're more of a jacket pocket kind of guy, it'll fit easily in any. Plus, the size lends it nicely to everyday activities like handling payments. Like any other Samsung phone before it, it has Samsung Pay, which can be activated on the outer screen with just an up swipe. And it's here where the fingerprint sensor makes sense, and it's easily reached. The NFC chip sits on the bottom, and with that, you've got a perfect box for your contactless payments. Now, in a form factor like this, whilst it's the most accessible it's ever been, there's still a few compromises to be seen. The first one is in haptics. Out of all the Galaxy phones I've used in the last 12 months, the Z Flip 3 definitely has the weakest haptics by far. Calls and vibrations sound tinny and cheap compared to the haptic engine that you see in the S21 Ultra. Now, this shouldn't be particularly surprising given how slim the housing is in the Flip and the likely limited space inside, but it does take away from the experience. Having really tight and precise vibrations and haptics really go a long way to improve how premium something feels, so that's a real shame. But the biggest weakness by far has to be the battery life. Having top tier specs means it's likely going to be a power hungry sucker. And if I thought the S21 Ultra just about achieved adequate battery life with 5000 milliamps, then the 3300 milliamp hour unit seen in the Z Flip is definitely going to struggle, and it does. I could at best manage 3 hours of screen on time regularly, and more days than not I had to charge the phone before the end of the day with, pretty standard use. The outer screen goes a little way to ease the burden, but even with this, the phone still struggles. Way too often I'd get past lunchtime or early afternoon and have to start looking for a charger. But on the flip side, if you've got access to a charger, it can at least be mitigated by a fast charging wirelessly or via the cable. But speaking of wireless charging, the Flip design also means the charging coil is a little lower than normal, and if your charger is more like a stand that usually allows your phone to sit upright or at an angle, then the coil might not actually be in the right position and won't be compatible. So just keep that in mind. So yes, overall the battery life struggle is real, and you'll either need a charger handy close by or a power bank to comfortably make it to the end of the day. And that's pretty much it really. The Z Flip 3 is one of my favorite phones I've used this year, and despite the battery shortcomings, there are no other major compromises that I can see. It's got super performance, it's got super cameras, all in a super form factor. And I absolutely love it. I can't stop reaching for it. Foldable phones kept being sold as a product of the future, but the Z Flip 3 is one of the best examples of how the future is actually way closer than we think. So if you've been keen to get back into the foldable game, the Z Flip 3 retails for 1,500 Australian dollars for the 128 gig version, and whilst it's not cheap, it's definitely cheaper than it's ever been. And this one is definitely one of the best. I can't wait to see what the future looks like for other foldables. So tell me, does a foldable phone like the Galaxy Z Flip like this interest you? Let me know why or why not in the comments section below. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed what you saw, be sure to hit the like button if you haven't already, subscribe for more, and of course, ding the bell icon so you don't miss out. Hit me up in the socials, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Stay safe, guys, and of course, say good day to one of your mates for me. Cheers.